భారత వ్యోమగామి శుభాన్షు శుక్లా స్పేస్ టూర్ ముగిసింది. దాదాపు 18 రోజుల పాటు ఐఎస్ఎస్లో కీలక పరిశోధనలు చేసిన ఆయన భూమికి చేరుకుంటున్నారు. మరో 3 ఆస్ట్రోనాట్స్తో కలిసి స్పేస్లోకి వెళ్లిన శుక్లా స్పేస్ నుంచి చివరి సందేశం ఇచ్చారు. సారే జహాసే అచ్చా అంటూ అంతరిక్ష యానం అద్భుతమైన నమ్మశక్యం కాని ప్రయాణం అంటూ స్పీచ్ ఇచ్చారు. ఐఎస్ఎస్లో తన అధ్యాయం ముగిసిందని, ఇస్రో ప్రయాణం ఇప్పుడే ఆరంభమైందన్నారు. ప్రస్తుతం ఐఎస్ఎస్లో 11 మంది వ్యోమగాములున్నారు. అక్కడి నుంచి శుభాన్షు టీం భూమి మీదకొస్తోంది. ఐఎస్ఎస్లో మధ్యాహ్నం 2:25 స్పేస్ ఎక్స్ డ్రాగన్ వ్యోమనౌకలోకి చేరుకున్న శుక్లా టీం రేపు కాలిఫోర్నియా సమీపంలో ల్యాండ్ అవనుంది.
That burn was to increase the speed that Dragon is flying away from the station and send it further away from the orbiting laboratory. That departure burn will be followed
Houston Station,
about 3 minutes.
Thrusters are enabled.
Houston copies.
The depart burn 0 will be followed by the second departure burn in just about 3 minutes, around 6:20 a.m. Central, 7:20 a.m. Eastern, known as depart burn 1, and that will help move the spacecraft beyond the keepout sphere. And just a moment ago, you were hearing some communication between the Capcom or capsule communicator here in Mission Control Houston and the crew aboard the International Space Station. Currently on board the International Space Station, NASA astronaut Anne McClain was on tap to monitor and support Dragon's departure activities today. So once that second departure burn is completed in a couple of minutes from now, the Dragon and Axiom Mission 4 crew will move beyond the keepout sphere, and the keepout sphere is that invisible 200-meter line.
AX4 crew wants to thank you very much for your support. You guys are amazing.
And you just heard some kind words from Axiom Mission 4 commander thanking the flight control team for all
Together
of their support throughout their 18-day
our
mission.
Friendship and goodwill forever be an example of the good that results from shared optimism. Axiom 4, Godspeed and safe journey home to the best planet in the solar system.
Space copies.
Second in a series of 4 departure burns to take place in about 1 minute from now, and this will push the Dragon spacecraft and the Axiom Mission 4 crew beyond the keepout sphere. That keepout sphere is the invisible 200-meter line centered on the space station, and it is one of several safety zones set up to govern spacecraft arriving and departing from the space station. Before moving into the keepout sphere, spacecraft have to be configured where they would not cross the imaginary boundary for at least 4 orbits, even if the spacecraft lost all maneuvering. We are now about 10 seconds away from that second departure burn. Dragon is currently about 80 meters away from the International Space Station as it continues its departure. And depart burn 1, again, that second departure burn in a series of 4 is now underway, and it'll last about 20 seconds.
Dragon SpaceX on the Big Loop, depart burn 1 complete and nominal. You are go to DOF suits per procedure 4.012.
Nominal departure and 4012 for Dragon.
We just had confirmation there that that second departure burn, known as Depart Burn 1, has completed, and it was executed as expected. The crew is now going to start doffing or removing their spacesuits and getting settled in for their 22.5-hour journey back to Earth, again with that splashdown targeted for tomorrow morning, July 15th, off the coast of California. And as a reminder, just like during its approach to the International Space Station, Dragon's departure and deorbit is designed to be fully autonomous, requiring no action from the crew on board. However, unlike Dragon's arrival, there are no hold points during the departure sequence, therefore it takes a lot less time to leave the vicinity of the space station than to arrive. So we just had confirmation of that second departure burn being completed, and that is the second in a series of 4. However, it's the only one that was left within the vicinity of the space station. The next departure burn will take place about 45 minutes from now, after Dragon is well on its way back to Earth and outside of the approach ellipsoid. Dragon is now about 195 meters away from the International Space Station and should be crossing the keepout sphere momentarily. We just heard confirmation that Dragon has exited the keepout sphere. Again, the keepout sphere is an invisible 200-meter line centered on the space station. It's one of several safety zones set up to govern spacecraft arriving and departing from the International Space Station. While spacecraft are inside the keepout sphere, they have to be configured where they would not cross into the imaginary boundary for at least 4 orbits, even if the spacecraft lost all maneuvering. The next major milestone for Dragon's departure will be exiting the approach ellipsoid. This is planned to take place about 13 minutes from now.
Dragon, Station Houston on the Big Loop. Dragon has exited the keepout sphere.
Dragon copies.
Station copies.
Station looks beautiful.
Dragon Grace, if we didn't have a shutter constraint, you could see us waving.
All right, great copy.
So now that Dragon has exited the keepout sphere, the next major milestone for Dragon is crossing the approach ellipsoid. That will take place a little over 10 minutes from now. That approach ellipsoid is another imaginary shape similar to the keepout sphere, but this time it's a 3-dimensional ellipsoid measuring 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers. And one of the key differences with the approach ellipsoid is that vehicles outside of it have to be on what we call a 24-hour safe free drift trajectory. This means the spacecraft would not cross into the approach ellipsoid for at least 24 hours, even if it lost all maneuvering. After the spacecraft crosses the approach ellipsoid, joint operations will end, and responsibility for the spacecraft will be handed back to the SpaceX flight control team in Hawthorne, California. Again, everything continuing to look good with Dragon's departure today, following a physical separation about 10 minutes ago at 6:15 a.m. Central, 7:15 a.m. Eastern. Dragon is now about 340 meters away from the International Space Station and continuing to increase that distance. And teams on the ground will continue to monitor the weather ahead of a splashdown tomorrow, Tuesday, July 15th at 5:31 a.m. Eastern off the coast of California. After